popular in Tokyo, and in this
neighborhood there are lots and lots of shops that specialize in selling manga. So what is manga? Well, it's a very Japanese art.
30,000 people racing to get inside the Anime Expo.
The Western manga industry has grown massively in the last decade and carved out its own unique place. But for this story, we're gonna go back to the early 2000s, where a massive change took place. From the 80s to early 2000, manga was published as any normal book would in the West, being read left to right. It might not sound like a big deal, but Japanese authors were not happy with this change. So in 2002, the publisher Tokyopop released their 100% authentic manga line, publishing them in the original form, reading right to left, and releasing them smaller with a more affordable price. This decision changed the game completely. Manga suddenly exploded in popularity, and this created space for smaller publishers to jump in. In the following years, companies like Del Rey, Dr. Master and Seven Seas were founded. In this time frame, another publisher would pop up, a smaller company by the name of Infinity Studios, the subject of our story. We're gonna dive deep into their history, one of ambition and bad timing, their forgotten licenses, some of which never released, and how they went under and vanished without anyone noticing. Ever since the early 90s, manga has been slowly growing in popularity, but when Tokyopop released their 100% authentic manga line in 2002, this popularity skyrocketed. They sold them for $10 each, much lower compared to the $13 to $17 from competitors, and could produce them 3 to 6 times faster. The right-to-left format was received well, with test groups adjusting to it within a few pages. And to make sure readers knew, Tokyopop included a guide in the back of their manga. Other companies started to pop up during this time as well. Del Rey releasing big names like Parasite, Negama and Holic. A rendition of Shonen Jump by Viz Media hit the shelves of stores like Borders and Barnes & Noble. Seven Seas started to experiment and brought over more niche genres like Yuri, with the first release Strawberry Panic. But Tokyopop was the go-to publisher for manga, boasting as high as 50% of the export in the US by 2004. The strategy was fierce. They released volumes of Sailor Moon as their first publication, after the immense popularity of it in their magazine. They also provided retailers with spinner racks, so they could display books to get more eyes on the medium. Starting in 2002, Tokyopop organized a competition called the Rising Stars of Manga, where American authors could send in 15 to 25 pages of their works, where the top 10 could win anywhere between $500 to $2,500, and the works would be released in an anthology book. This was very popular, with over 500 authors submitting the works. But with every Sailor Moon or Parasite release came half a dozen other releases that flopped within 2 volumes. Translation quality was all over the place and the release schedules waned. This is what Infinite Studios walked into. A moment of big opportunities, but also an oversaturated and unstable market. Infinity Studios was a publisher that was founded by Jay Chung in early 2004 and was based in California. At the time he worked at Comics One, another publisher known for releasing manga like Crayon Shinchan and Junji Ito's Tomie. He was the chief information officer to the Korean division and was a translator. His decision to branch out and start his own company turned out to be a smart move, since Comics One went bankrupt just a year later, in 2005. From the beginning, Infinity Studios set their sights on manhwa, with the first license being Pagans by Sang-woo Park, an action sci-fi about a high school girl finding herself in the middle of a battle between an organization of genetically mutated humans called Pagans and a notorious serial killer. They started out well with Pagans, officially releasing in July 2004. They made their first big appearance at FanimeCon, where they promoted Pagans and teased another project, a manga by the name of Tears of an Angel, made by Jay himself. We'll come back to this manga later. Their ambitions were high. In an interview with Anime Advanced at Anime Expo in August of 2004, Jay told more about the path and goals of Infinity Studios, saying, "One of our primary objectives is to bring into the spotlight Korean manhwa. In fact, our goal is not only to become one of the premier publishers of Japanese manga, but to become the #1 Korean manhwa publisher in the US. Infinity Studios was a big advocate for manhwa. They saw the potential in them and they criticized other publishers for passing up on Korean titles, or market them as Japanese manga to sell better. In this interview, Jay also told about the close relationship with Comics One, and you can find traces of this in a lot of their early releases. They announced that they got hands on more than a dozen Korean and Japanese licenses, some of which would be revealed in the coming month. Infinity Studios started out fairly slow, with only Pagans Volume 1 to 4 being released in 2004. They did announce various licensings throughout this half year, with their second title being a manhwa by the name of Bambi by Young-ha Park, which is a retelling of a classical Asian fairy tale, and a manhwa that's more aimed towards girls. And they weren't lying, the announcements kept rolling in, with at least one license being announced per month, like the Missing White Dragon in September, and the month after, the first manga, those being Popuken by Iwasaki Masakusa, and the one that started this whole video, a manga by the name of Nana Nana by Shotaro Harada. Licensings and the release of manga and manhwa kept going throughout 2005, with plenty of titles being announced, like Blood Alone and Zero the Beginning of the Coffin, while also having various other news posts about website updates, giveaways and signings at various anime cons. In April of 2005 they announced that some manga and manhwa would have limited edition bonuses. These included things like dust jackets, colored pages, posters and postcards. In this announcement they also mentioned figures, though I'm unable to verify if those were ever produced. Over the years that Infinity Studios was active, they put out only a couple handfuls of titles, but even though it's a small catalog, it's a very unique one. It shows what they were really passionate about, with most licenses being Korean manhwa, with a smaller selection of Japanese manga. With, as previously mentioned, the first manhwa being Pagans and Bambi, and the first manga Popuken, and nowadays the most fascinating one of their entire catalog, that being Nana Nana, a comedy manga that follows a robot that's addicted to donuts. It's the most fascinating one, not because of how weird or wacky the story is, no, because it's one of the most obscure officially translated manga there is. So obscure in fact that it doesn't even have a My Anime List page. Can you imagine that? Infinity Studios bought the license for this Japanese manga, so it's popular enough to warrant the risk of bringing it over, translating it and then selling it to a Western audience. But it flopped so bad that 20 years later no one knows a thing about it. And before you say anything, yes, on the cover it does say Sho equals Taro Harada. That's not an edit. It's like this on the Japanese version as well, so it's like a stylistic choice of the author, I guess. Some of the manga also came with dust jackets, something that's unfortunately never really done here. Like Ayone-sama Phonetics, a yuri comedy about a queen with a fetish for girls with long straight black hair and wants to make them her escorts. I'm not making this up. Infinity Studios wasn't afraid to experiment. They didn't really follow trends, but picked out the titles that seemed most interesting to them. And the amount of care they put in shows. The volumes themselves are very nice. It's one of the highest quality books I have in my collection, with different texturing on their covers, sturdy spines and high quality and environmentally friendly paper. They cared about quality over quantity, but this type of quality comes with a price. Not just the cost of production, but also the time to make each release. And the choice to focus on premium quality and niche titles may have been one of the many cracks in the foundation of Infinity Studios. Infinity Studios couldn't be stopped. In early 2005 they partnered up with Diamond Book Distributors, a popular distribution company, to help them with shipping and filling bookstores and libraries across the US. 2005 was a great year for them. They updated their website in April and added the forum and blog the month after. They kept the momentum going through June and July, and we saw various book releases, like Volume 1 of Hora Sailor and Fighting Guidance. Along with the new releases of Now and Ninninga Shinobuden came another announcement. The first public apology for delays. Just a small note, easy to overlook at the time, but in hindsight, a hint at what's to come. The later half of 2005 saw 4 more licenses announced, including fan favorites like Zero the Beginning of the Coffin and Blood Alone. The momentum was there, they had their distribution all sorted and were building a solid catalog of manga and manhwa. With this momentum they were going into 2006. It took a while for something new to come out. Only 4 months in did we hear about a new release date for Now, scheduled to come out in August, and with that came their biggest announcement. They acquired the license for Unbalance. The year ended for Infinity Studios with an announcement of the winners of the Halloween giveaway in November. It was a less than stellar year for them, with only 1 new license announced, though a great one, compared to 2005, which had 6. They have a decent backlog now, but 2006 definitely slowed down a bit. I'm sure 2007 will be a great year for them again, right? December of 2006 came and went. The new year rolled over and now it's January 2007. No announcements from them, but 2006 started a bit slow as well, with an update later in April. Then, April of 2007 passed. and there was still nothing. The summer came and went. September, silence. Months passed without a single update. Until November, an entire year without a single update from Infinity Studios. The year rolled over again, and finally, a spark of life. In February of 2008, there was finally an announcement. Richmond, CA, February 25th, 2008. Today, Infinity Studios LLC is proud to announce the introduction of our all-digital ebooks. After almost a year and a half of silence, Infinity Studios finally reappeared in early 2008 with their all-digital ebooks announcement. The reception was mixed. Some people were positive about the step in innovation towards ebooks, but others wouldn't ever buy a book from them again. But ebooks wouldn't come like you'd expect. When you purchased one from Infinity Studios, it wasn't a log on their site or an email with a zip file, not even on Kindle either. Infinity Studios burned PDFs on CDs and would mail them out to customers in DVD cases. Honestly, people were just glad to see them active again since they had been waiting for the books to arrive. But very few of their releases would still be as paperbacks, and all of the promised titles from 2007 were cancelled and turned into ebooks. It's a mystery if these ebooks were ever actually released. While books have a unique identifier with the ISBN, DVDs generally do not use them. Instead, DVDs are tracked with UPCs, and only some educational or instructional DVDs are assigned ISBNs. The only evidence I've ever been able to find outside of news articles and unavailable listings is in a blog called The Land of Obscuration, where these DVDs are mentioned, with more details in the comment below. I did order CDs from them and received it. It was a basic CDR and DVD case that also doubled as the mailer. No envelope or box, just mailing labels slapped directly on the DVD case. It's been so long I don't remember the contents other than now and CRYJ being on there. And maybe Zero Beginning of the Coffin. They were also releasing that one back then too. Infinity Studio wanted to be ahead of the curve, and going digital might have seemed like the correct call to stick out of the crowd. It was an unorthodox way of selling them, but this might have been the only solution to such a small publisher like Infinity Studios. But this way of selling still costs money, with production time, inventory management and whole logistics changes that had to be made to compensate for the digital aspect. But it wasn't meant to be. After the ebook change, the whole image changed with it. The only announcements were new ebook releases. They never appeared in public anymore, and there were no more giveaways or website updates. While all the news posts before this point had more charm and personality, after the change they were very plain and very straightforward. And on December 11th, 2008, they made their final post, with their website staying up for another year, until December 2009, without a news post or announcement. All the orders were cancelled, and quietly, the lights went out. These times were tough for publishers. Infinity Studios was part of a bigger picture. Central Park Media, Del Rey Manga, Dr. Master and plenty of others went bankrupt during this time. But tucked away in used bookstores, sitting on forgotten shelves, or gathering dust in someone's attic, most people will never see an Infinity Studios title. But for me, they are a special part of the history of manga. As far as I can tell, only Blood Alone got a revival, the license being obtained by Seven Seas Entertainment. The rest of the releases were left unfinished, and a handful never even came out. During their silent period in 2007, they sneakily picked up the license of a manga called Chibimono by Shinonome Mizuo, though Infinity Studios went bankrupt before the release of the first volume. Going back to the start, another curious case was Adrenaline by Younghwa Lee. This was released in 2008 for 2 volumes in the form of ebooks, but it was briefly seen on the site all the way back in 2004. What happened to this, I'm not sure. Tears of an Angel by Jay himself never saw the light of day either. This was teased as one of the first manga to come out during the interview in 2004, and was revealed to be a fantasy romance story about a guy that loses his memories in an accident and discovers the world around him is not like it seems, but wasn't to be announced for months until it was quietly removed. A lot of times when manga goes out of print, the price increases. For some of Infinity Studios releases, however, that never really happened. Only costs you between $5 to $20 when available. Compared to titles like Secret Devil-chan, where just the first volume will cost you more than $40. Or the Umineko releases, some of which are more than 10 times the retail price. The later releases and more niche titles are much harder to come by. And while some can still be cheap, there are certain ones that can go up to $50. Infinity Studios may have left us quietly. The catalog tells us a lot more about who they were. They were a small publisher with big ambitions, who cared deeply about their releases, and this shows in the high quality of the books. They went for titles that no other company looked for. They tried to bring something new to the Western world, but these titles were too niche, which made the foundation that Infinity Studios had built very fragile. Yet, every time someone finds one of these books, reads it and talks about it, Infinity Studios is remembered again. And for a publisher whose mission was to share these stories with the world, I think that's the best kind of ending they could have asked for.